Let's wait a few more seconds. Okay. There's a bit of delay, but we should be good. So I'm gonna mute my computer just in case. Yeah, the audio's coming out. Alrighty. So welcome everybody, and the usual disclaimer. Man, this is a big microphone. Can you hear me fine, everyone? You can't hear me. Choose the English channel because it's the usual deal. My microphone is connected. Oh, actually, yeah. Okay, so I can be heard though, right? Nobody else has a problem?
Yeah, now you're good.
Okay. Okay, so welcome again. Usual disclaimers. The sound you hear is the cicadas that are in full swing, given that it's the middle of the dry season, and so I hope you don't get too distracted by it. It's there's nothing I can do about that. Today they're not even as fierce as they were yesterday, but it's we're all gonna have to live with that. The second disclaimer is, as usual, for those who are joining only this time, that I already did my prayers and my pranayama before this encounter in order to maximize the time that we have together. So this is the meeting of the four that we have available, where I get to talk about what I really wanted to talk about originally. What gave me the idea of talking about pranayama this way. Still, I thought it was appropriate to give a generic, presentation, a generic description of what my concept behind this presentation was in the first encounter, and then in the second encounter we talked about the physicality of pranayama and the approach, or the yogic approach, the vision of the yogis about pranayama. And today we're talking about the actual Gaudiya perspective, but keep in mind, like I said at the beginning, sorry, I got something crawling on me. The beauty of living in the forest. Yeah, it was just an ant, luckily. Gaudiya perspective doesn't mean anything in particular until probably the very end of this conference, today's conference. It's for the most part the perspective of a spiritualist and a personalist spiritualist, because we said last time that for the most part pranayama is couched in the yogic approach and vision of reality. So pranayama is but a phase that starts with yama and niyama, so observance of certain regulations. Like my Guru Maharaj Srila Tripurari Maharaj says, it's a disqualifier that if you want to even consider the path of bhakti, you have to be celibate. And that's something that is not very popular nowadays, because who has that kind of strength? Most people that just want to do yoga asanas. Asanas are the next step. So I'm going to cover what I'm going to briefly cover what I discussed in the previous two encounters, just to condense it all in this one conference, which is like I said, the one that is most important to me in light of what I want to talk about. So I was saying that in yoga, what was I saying? Pranayama is a phase. Yeah, unfortunately, I lost that train of thought. But yeah, it's very mechanical. The approach of yoga is very much eat this, or contain your energy, and control your diet, control your breathing, which is the next phase. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Asanas, as a devotee once told me, mean really to treat your body as a chaise longue, as a beach chair for the soul, so that if the body is comfort, if the soul is comfortable in the body, you can forget about the body and focus on your more real nature, on your true nature, which, as we know, is not necessarily dependent, or, well, it is related, but it's not dependent. How would you say? It's can live independently from the body and the mind. So pranayama is the bridge. It takes from the physical to the mental through the medium of breath. It because if you think about it, is somebody saying something? No. Oh, it's sorry. It's just the echo on YouTube. If you think about it, can be found in our own body. The liquidity, incidentally, that correspond to solid excrements, liquid excrements. And oops, it says that my internet is unstable. I hope there are no problems. Um, Unfortunately, there's nothing I can close. We were talking about liquidity, solidity, liquidity, and there's fire, represented by the enzymes, digestive enzymes, and then there is air, which is the most subtle of the physical elements. Technically, ether is even more subtle and still physical. But you can see that air is like the last frontier. And so by acting on the breath very physically, controlling it, stretching it, holding it, etc., it affects the nervous system. Nowadays, there's all kinds of breath work available in books and literature where they talk about the technicalities of acting on the breath, how pranayama already says that all diseases can be cured by proper pranayama, and all kinds of diseases can come from improper application of pranayama. That's why it's a very strict, rigorous practice, and like I said, very physical. Let's take a little break from this and consider the simplicity of bhakti, where even just by doing bhakti inadvertently or, with mistakes, it still brings dividends in our bank account, in the bhakti bank account. So that's already something to consider. So going back to the yogic worldview, or like in karma, if in karma yoga, and in the karmic approach, in the yogic approach, you have to do everything really right to the letter to get your results. So pranayama is best adopted after yama niyama and asanas, etc. Otherwise, you could just spoil everything. Myself, when I don't do pranayama correctly, I am short of breath all day. But anyway, I was saying that properly applied pranayama is curing all diseases, from mental diseases like depression, a lot of things that we don't think about. We just think, okay, I'm oxygenated the blood. Cannot be a bad thing. It has ramifications and implications that you wouldn't imagine if you weren't familiar with the benefits and the functionality of pranayama. And also I said that pranayama is absorbing prana by, or stretching the prana. So you absorb this energy that's all over the universe, that can be found in nutritious food, or even just the touch of a person who, vibes positively towards you, or good words. Like I say many times in my prayers before this encounter, I pray that my words are charged with prana, so that just by sitting through it, whether you understand or not, you get some benefit. So breath is the most available source of prana, given that we breathe at every, well, not at every second, but constantly. Breathing means living, so there is some profound implications to this. which is what I hope to discuss in the balance of this encounter. So I was saying that so to absorb prana, the best and easiest thing is to breathing, because we don't eat all the time, we don't have love and exchanges all the time, we don't sit in the sun all the time, but we do breathe all the time, even when we sleep. And so by absorbing prana through breathing, this prana goes to our organs, the very mechanical action of breathing in and out massages our organs, and it pushes blood and nutrients and information, stimulates the nerves, and it affects the nervous system in ways that are very, very complex. In yogic literature, I think they mention 72,000 nadis, if I'm not incorrect, which are all our nerve endings. And so, yes, it affects the nervous system, and in the very least, it calms our mind. Isn't that something we would want? Obviously, yes, it's not essential to bhakti. Last time we're talking about the reasons why a bhakta or a bhakti practitioner would look down on pranayama, or our acharyas say that it's a distraction to bhakti, because it could make you overly focused or obsessed with your body, with your health, all the way up to developing mystic powers. All these mystic powers, from levitation to the ones that are listed in our scriptures, they all start from controlling the breath, from breathing in a certain way that affects your consciousness, kind of like turns on parts of your mind, of your brain, and it allows you to act through matter in a certain way. And so I was saying that the idea for this presentation was to not demonize pranayama or anything that is not pure bhakti, because the truth is that we don't do pure bhakti, even if it's our ideal. We all have, a family life. We're not the hardcore, focused brahmachari that left everything behind in the 70s to join Prabhupada because of his charisma and because of the sense of urgency they had. And there's nothing wrong with that. We've become more of a world religion with our family life and our secondary interests. So why not use something like pranayama to just calm our minds or clear our minds before japa, for example, or just to have a better life, from the health point of view and the psychophysical point of view, and etc. So that was the overview. I think I covered mostly what I talked about in the last two encounters, although briefly. What I want to talk about now, this time, is the insights, the spiritual insights, the insights into reality, spirit, matter, ourselves, and what goes on through breath. It just so happens that I read once in a book, I forget where I was. I think it's when our little Sangha, when Guru Maharaj and a few disciples, including me, we moved to Point Arena and in a rented house, and I just ran into this book by somebody, maybe I can't remember, some Swami, and it was saying that when we breathe in, we should meditate on so, and when we breathe out, we should meditate on hum. And I'll say in a while why so hum, what it means, etc., etc. So that's what gave me the idea many years later, which is a few months ago, of how would you make that more Gaudiya. So that's what I'm going to try to elaborate on in the balance of this lesson. For now, let's just talk about the... if you remember, in our first encounter, I said the very fact of focusing on your breath is very profound. Or let's say from another point of view, we go most of our lives, most of us go most of their lives totally oblivious, unaware of their own breathing. The very act of breathing, as essential to life as it is governed by a part of our nervous system that goes in automatic. Because it's so important, because we cannot forget to breathe, we would die. At the same time, we go about life focusing on everything else but what keeps us alive. So, and I was saying the implications of that are profound. And another funny thing is that the moment you start talking about breath, or you start hearing someone talking about breath, first thing you do is take a deep breath. You're like, oh yeah, breathing. So the metaphor can be made with material life in general. We go about life like the song Bhajahure Mana says, Kamala Dala Jala Jivana Tala Mala, means that we let our lives slip away like a drop of water slips off a lotus leaf, which is waxy, and so it's waterproof. So it kind of makes you wonder: am I living life really, or is life living through me? And before you know, it's time to die. And what have I done with my life? How can you live if you don't know who you are? If you don't know what you need? If you don't know who you are, you don't know what's good for you, etc., etc. So clearly, you cannot get to these realizations just by breathing, just by noticing, oh, I'm breathing. I'm talking, I'll be weaving back and forth between the realizations that you could get just by thinking of your breath and the realizations that you could think about breathing based on the wealth of our scriptural knowledge. Clearly, this example of knowing who you are and what's best for you was taking into account the context, the Vedic context, that you are not the body, your consciousness, etc. But talking again, these cicadas distracted me to begin with, so I really feel for all of you. Let's keep strong. What was I saying? Going back to breathing. Uh, um, the very first act we do as we come out of the womb is to take a breath, to breathing, to take a breath. And the very last thing we do is to breathe out, unwillingly. So, in one sense, I said that the very first breath that a baby takes is the beginning of their karmic debt. Clearly, life after life, but it symbolizes that you come into the world, you were in the womb, you weren't particularly involved in the mesh of karma. The moment you take a first breath, you're in debt. You've taken from material energy, which is not your energy, it's Krishna's energy. So, as you are, and you may be thinking, what fault does the baby have for breathing? But like I said, it's a metaphor, it's an analogy. Or you could just say that the drive to breathe in is the push of the past karma of that person that wants to express itself. Karma has to play out. But anyway, at every breath in and out, maybe somebody wouldn't notice that, oh, I'm breathing in and now I'm breathing out. But if we were to take a step back from reality and just observe the fact that you need to breathe in and breathe out, the very rhythmical nature of breathing could be a cue, a source of inspiration to, how would you say, analyze reality as we're used to. In other words, breathing is a very clear expression that's literally under our noses of the duality of this world. Little water break. So all I'm saying is that you could take advantage of your own breathing and take it as an opportunity to meditate on the duality of this world. Breathe in, breathe out, take, give, full, empty, and on and on and on. If you are familiar, if you're already acquainted with me and my ramblings from my previous presentation on the importance of prayer, I was talking for a long time about how this world can be seen as a holodeck, which, if you don't know Star Trek, is an environment with laser projectors that would recreate a reality, but it's all a hologram. And if you don't know what a hologram is, well, it's a laser reality. So, say it's a virtual reality created by laser. And what we know from Scripture is that what we call reality now is virtual indeed, just as well. Because when you go to the very essential components of matter, you find atoms, which, with so much empty space between the nucleus and the first electron, that makes you wonder, how can I be touching this table? And it feels so solid, so real and concrete, because the table is made of matter. My hand is made of meat and bones, but it's essentially the same material elements. So they just interact with one another, just like the pixels in a computer game. They're just pixels that just have values of 0 and 1. So the computers reflect the duality of our own world, of the external world. From the computer's point of view, it's just 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. But we see, forgive me, but I'm not much of a gamer, so I wouldn't know. I know that there is a game about, what is it, Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie. So anyway, we see the character having to achieve something, jump off a cliff or something, a cliff. It's all pixels, but we give them value. And the character interacts in a way that if this group of pixels that we call Angelina Jolie or us, identified with the protagonist of the game, jumps too long, she lands on land, and if she jumps too short, she goes down a cliff. But it's all light, different values of light. So similarly, our own concrete, solid, real world as we perceive it is just values, a particular configuration of material atoms. So we're talking about the holodeck, and the duality. There is a binary code to our reality, our own world, based on 0, 1, whether you want to call it Shiva or Linga, Yoni, the masculine principle and the feminine principle. And before any one of you who may be new gets all caught up in anti-sexist considerations, it doesn't matter which one is which. The masculine is not necessarily good or positive, because masculine is also, how would you say, compared to positive, to penetrating, to giving, and then feminine is receiving, negative. It just means duality. They're one just as valid, just as good as the other, both in a material sense and we'll see also in a spiritual sense. They're just what reality is. There is one part of reality that has certain characteristics and another part that has other characteristics that are opposed, and they kind of attract one another and they create this whole mechanism, the engine of material world. So the binary code, like I said, you can call it Linga, Yoni, Shiva, Shakti, masculine, feminine, positive, negative, good, bad, happy, sad, hot, cold, etc., etc. And all this is reflected in our own experience of pranayama. We were talking last time about the masculine or sun or hot or heat related nadi, which is the Well, now I can't remember which one. Anyway, they're all intertwined, right? It's like a big DNA ellipse, the Kundalini that flows in our body from the root to the last chakra, kind of symbolizes us and our particular DNA conformation and all the potential. Anyway, let's not go there. What was I talking about? The hot and the cold, the duality of the world. So the very first realization you can have just from breathing, just from bringing your thought, your discrimination, and therefore your awareness, your consciousness to breathing, is to be reminded about the duality of the world, that this world is running on a binary code. And what does it really mean? Is the good really good? Is the bad really bad? How can you consider something good if there is no bad? And then there's the transcendental point of view, where both material good and material bad are just, to quote the example that Srila Prabhupada used many times, dry stool and wet stool. There's a story, like a little joke in Bengali of two people going down a road. Yeah, like in India there are cows at random, like you would find pigeons in some other cities. And so their droppings are all over, just like the cows. And somebody would be walking down the street and say, that cow patty is all dry on the surface, but if you flip it, it's still wet. Or this cow patty is all dry, but this one is fresh. And the other person is thinking, it's all poop. Why does it matter? So that is some approach that we could have in relation to matter. Doesn't mean that matter is an illusion. It doesn't mean that it's intrinsically bad. Like I said, let's not make the mistake of demonizing everything. The first encounter I was saying that one of the reasons why I chose to talk about something, low on the ladder of topics is that I like the idea of Vaishnavas, aspiring Vaishnavas, sadhakas, to be educated that they shouldn't demonize everything. A Vaishnava is somebody who Krishnaizes everything. They see the good, the absolute. They see Krishna's smiling face behind any expression of matter, even the most horrible ones. If that is what they have in their heart, the example is given of the bee eye or the fly eye. Bees are always looking for nectar, and that's what they find. And flies are always looking for excrements or, more disgusting things, and that's what they gravitate around. So let's be bees. Let's have the eye of a Vaishnava and see the world through Krishna's world. Okay, so we shouldn't demonize anything. So we shouldn't demonize matter. It's not that matter is bad. It's an energy of the Lord, just like the spiritual energy is. In fact, you can make the case that it's all consciousness. It's all energy. In physics, they used to talk about energy and matter. Our scriptures more aptly talk about spiritual energy and material energy. And one is the thickening, the condensation, or the one derives from the other. But yes, all there is energy. God himself can be perceived as pure energy, pure consciousness. These are all very complex topics that, if misworded slightly or slightly misunderstood, a whole philosophy can come out of I wouldn't say erroneous interpretation, but you can understand that these are topics that can be interpreted in many ways. They give, rise to many interpretations. But I hope I haven't lost you when I said that everything is energy, everything is consciousness. At the same time, there is matter in a way. It's like saying material energy is like the steam in the sky, and then sometimes in the clouds, or the clouds, they take the shape of a dragon or a rabbit. So is there really a rabbit? Is there really a dragon? What really is there is steam, is water vapor. So material energy exists. Does the table really exist? Does my body really exist? It's all pixels. It's all values. Who gives value to matter? Consciousness gives value to matter. So, and I'm just rambling right now. It's just the ABCs of Krishna consciousness or Vedic sensibility. My point is that you could be reminded of all this just by breathing, just by remembering that you're breathing and what it means or what it could stand for. Another water break. So, when I said that the first breath in symbolizes our karmic debt, and when we breathe out at the end of our life, it's like we give back what was never ours. You could say, yeah, but there are so many breaths in between. But mathematically, if you were to put all the inhalations on one side and all the exhalations on the other side, they all cancel out. They all amount to one big breath in and one big breath out. Or in other words, somebody's life can be summarized as one big breath. Does that sound familiar? It is said that Mahavishnu is lying, Karanodaka Shai Vishnu is lying on the Karanodaka, so the causal waters, the causal ocean, and as he snoozes, God doesn't really sleep. He's snoozing around, and because from our point of view, sleep means to lose consciousness, to be out of control, to be steeped in tamoguna and ignorance. How can Vishnu sleep, and how can consciousness lose consciousness? So anyway, he's just snoozing there, and as he breathes out, and infinite universes come out of his pores and his breath, and as he breathes in, the universes go back into his persona, himself. So the whole life of the universe is included in one breath of Vishnu. So that's why I said, if you pile up all your breaths in one life, it all amounts to a one big inhalation and one big exhalation. And this opens the door to another reflection, which is a huge, huge topic, and one that can also be misunderstood. But I would venture to say that everything that is said about Vishnu, maybe not Krishna, but at least Vishnu. Vishnu is Narayana in relation to the world, to matter, whether it's remotely related to matter, like Mahavishnu at the very border, as if, it could be conceived in geographical terms, really. There's no end of the spiritual world. There's this Viraja river. Viraja is, a river because, again, the Vedas are talking to us at the end of the day. Revealed knowledge is not for people that don't need anything to be revealed to them because they already know everything. You reveal knowledge to people who are ignorant. So the common person understands rivers. There is land, there is a river, there could be another nation on the other side of the river. So reality, to put it in very broad terms, is described like this. There's a spiritual realm, and then there's the Viraja river, on which it's like a river and an ocean at the same time. It just means the border between spirit and matter, where Mahavishnu lies, and he dreams of so many. Well, he does. Yeah. Well, he how do you say, emanates all these universes, basically the material world, as he breathes in and out. So that's Vishnu. It's not Narayan anymore. Narayan is just concerned with his pastimes within Vaikuntha. So you have Mahavishnu, and then Garbhodakashaya Vishnu is the, what's it called? The ocean of birth. There's the causal ocean, the Garbhodaka, I forget what it's called in English. Causal ocean, it's on the tip of my tongue. There's the milk ocean, the causal ocean. Anyway, the one in between, Garbhodaka. Anyway, in Sanskrit it means the ocean of birth. So what I was saying is that all three can be called Mahavishnu. You will see that in the scriptures they don't really differentiate. They're just one, the expansion of the other. Everything that's said about Mahavishnu in relation to matter constitutes a description, a macrocosmic description of what goes on in our own individual microscopic experience. In other words, Vishnu is the Vishwatma. He's the soul of the world, the soul of the universe. He represents consciousness in relation to the compound of a whole universe with all the galaxies and the planets and stars and everything that goes on in each planet and all the dynamics. It's just matter, right? It's just pixels. It's just material energy. And so that is matter, and what Vishnu does in relation to matter, all the descriptions given about him, basically, if we were to abstract to the most essential components, Vishnu just stands for consciousness. He doesn't just stand for consciousness. I'm not saying that it's all a metaphor or an allegory. There is nothing wrong in conceiving Vishnu as a person lying on the ocean with all his attributes, but he is pure consciousness at the same time. It's our material nature and the limited intelligence that makes us go, well, which is it? Is it like that or is it like this? We're talking about the absolute. We have to step out of relative considerations, even just as an intellectual exercise. Just accept certain things on the intellectual level, even if our reality is totally the opposite. So yes, it's the absolute we're discussing, and the absolute can be, well, it's absolute. It has no limit. It can be personal as well as impersonal at the same time, and it's perfectly fine. To make a parallel with quantum physics, you know that there's this big, topic in quantum physics, this big consideration that reality, or let's say a photon, an electron, behaves as a particle or as a wave, and the two depend on the consciousness of the observer, or the very fact that an observer is there. So if the observer, say the scientist, is examining matter, say the photon, the electron, expects the electron to the photon to behave like a particle, then it behaves like a particle. And if it expects it to behave like a wave, it behaves like a wave. So that's another profound example or expression of how consciousness gives meaning to matter. Matter, for all intents and purposes, could very well not exist. And that's what we are taught. There's a whole realm that we call the spiritual world. Again, don't make the mistake of thinking in geographical terms. There is no spiritual world that ends and then the river and all. That's just a conceptualization. It's all infinite. If the spiritual world is infinite, it pervades the material world. In fact, the material world, I don't want to say that it doesn't exist, but it exists as much as you have material consciousness. Consciousness is what determines matter. Bhava, the feeling, is what determines reality. So, again, going back to the virtual reality and the video game, I may be, and I wish we all had the same background and knew the same computer game so that I can make an example that really touches home for everybody. But I mean, it's 2022. You may have seen, you just may understand vaguely how virtual reality and computer games work. Let's pretend that these games have levels, first level, second level. So I'm here. The same Syamasundara is sitting at the computer. It could be a screen, it could be a keyboard or a mouse, or it could be cyber goggles and a cyber glove. So I'm just interacting with this world, and I do things. I kill enemies. I collect all the eggs. There was a game where I had to collect dinosaur eggs. It came with a MacBook, with the iMac that I bought once. And as you achieve a certain goal, you step up. So you are the same person sitting here, but the world you're in, or even just Mario, what's the thing called? Super Mario? I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't go. I never even played Pac-Man. But you go up in level, but you're still here. So all we're asked to do is change our level of consciousness, tune our consciousness frequency, and vibrate at God's frequency, Krishna frequency. That's what they say with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. God is one. In fact, there's nothing other than God. God and his energies, which are one and the same. There's nothing other than God. We perceive so much differentiation. So, the Supreme Personality of God, head, means a certain frequency, a certain, set of feelings and characteristics, etc. That means that if you change frequency, you can, switch to Narayan, Ramachandra, Varaha, and then you go, left or right, wherever in this experience. And we are also expressions of God. It's all, consciousness expressing itself either through the Swarup Shakti's scenario or through the Maya Shakti scenario. But we are different from God, but nothing other than God. We are a spark of him. The Jiva is interesting because it's both Shakti and Purusha at the same time. We have a certain agency in this world. Something more could be said about that, but I don't want to go all over the place. But yeah, we are a speck of God, and that's why we feel like we are divine and in this world. Okay, I'll say it. Basically, remember how I was talking about masculine and feminine being totally equal. So yeah, let's talk about let's go all the way to the climax of transcendence, the dealings between Radha and Krishna. Krishna is the source of everything. He is the source of his own Shakti. The Swayam Shakti is Radharani. And yet we find that in Vrindavan, the secret to Vrindavan is that she is Vrindavaneshwari. The Shakti, yes, she comes from Krishna, but Krishna is all about the love of Radha. So just like he is lost for his devotee, he is the tattva. He is, or the tattva is that he is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. And yet the bhava, the feeling, is that he is the friend of Sridhama and Subala, who sometimes beat him in wrestling. He is afraid, he's the son of Yashoda, who sometimes chastises him. So, yes, the tattva is what it is, but then the feeling creates a different tattva, a different reality. And so, it's striking to realize how the energy that comes from God, and again, it's very, very important that you realize that you will always be off track if you think in terms of, in geographical terms. If you think in terms of time and space to begin with, you're off track. Time and space belong to the holodeck that the material world is. They're constructs. We perceive time and space, but again, we units of consciousness that overpopulate this world. My concept of time is different than somebody else's concept of time, and it's the same substance, so to speak. I'm here having the time of my life talking about reality and Krishna and Krishna's energy, and some of you may be thinking, my God, when is this going to be over? Oh my God, it's already 11:15, so I'm not going to have time to talk about all I wanted to talk about. But you see how time and space are relative by their own nature, because they're material, so they're relative. So don't make the mistake of applying geographic sensibilities to Vrindavan, anatomical sensibilities to Krishna's body, before and after sensibility to eternity. It's a mistake. So, yes, Krishna's energy, or Krishna is the source of his energy. At what time? Never. They both exist at the same time. They're both the same reality. So, is Radharani subordinate to Krishna? Is Krishna's energy subordinate to Krishna? Ontologically, yes, because it's not the other way around. It's not that Krishna is the product of If he was the product, then he would be the energy, and Radharani and everything else would be the source of the energy. One has to be one, and one has to be the other. But you can see that they both are valid. They both are good. And you could even make the point that the energy is actually running things. So, you have this effect, this property that Krishna's energy has, where, funnily, Krishna is in fact the source of everything, the supreme personality of Godhead. He's omniscient, he's omnipotent, he's omnipresent, and yet under the influence of the spirit of Yogamaya, his internal Shakti. One second. He thinks he's a limited human being of sort. He is the helpless child of Yashoda who can tell him, you're grounded or something. And then on the other hand, we, under the influence of the external energy, who are indeed limited, we are called. So Krishna is deluded to think he's just a common person with friends and family. And under the influence of material energy, we are deluded to think that we are God. Because only in the material world we can think that we are the little gods of our own world, the beneficiary of everybody's friendship and attention. And whether we're educated and civilized, or even if we are educated and civilized and we know intellectually that we're not, our tendency as a conditioned soul is to think that everything is meant for me. And so yeah, that's one thing to consider. Energy has more power over the source of the energy, more power than the source of the energy. And again, what does it mean to be the source? A river comes from a glacier. So yeah, the glacier is melting and what's ice becomes water. But there wouldn't be a glacier if the water from the ocean hadn't evaporated and hadn't traveled as clouds over this area and hadn't snowed in this area, and the snow hadn't frozen over many times over the centuries to create a glacier. So which comes first? This is not the kind of thinking that we should be making, because it doesn't help us understand and appreciate certain things. Okay, so that was a tangent. What was I talking about? Duality. Was I making that point? The duality of the material world. How focusing on your breath reminds you of all that, if that is not enough. And then more considerations could be there. Let me first make sure I said everything I wanted to say about Mahavishnu. So I was saying that, oh yeah, that was an important point. Everything that's said about Vishnu in relation to the world applies to us. Vishnu stands for consciousness. The whole universe stands for matter. In the microcosmic, at the microcosmic level, everything that's said about Vishnu is true of every jiva soul. And that's when, it could get shaky if you don't have a very solid understanding of the world as described in the scriptures. Not that I have it, but I'm doing my very best to express this in a cohesive and helpful way while trying to understand it myself. What does it mean? It means that, you know how they say that there are infinite universes? One way to see that is that there are infinite jiva souls. Isn't that true? So you could conceive of it as Mahavishnu is lying on the causal ocean, and then infinite universes come out of his pore, and each universe is filled with infinite souls. Or, if you count, given that there are infinite universes, you cannot count the souls. But one way to see that is also that if you were to consider matter, the conglomerate of matter, as the holodeck in the Star Trek analogy, so this area where the laser projectors create a reality, there are infinite jiva souls, but they could all coexist in the same, say, universe. What does it mean? That, again, we have to go back to the video game analogy. I know that there are games where, unfortunately, many of them are violent. They're like war games. So I'm here in Costa Rica, sitting at my computer, and I'm identified with a certain character. I know that there is one where you get to see your arms with the gun. All you see is your arms, and you decide where to point, who to shoot, and whatever they do. They probably just kill one another. But I'm playing with somebody in Scotland, and somebody in Vietnam, and somebody in Chile. And we're all in our bedroom or something, in our office, playing the same game. And if my partner, the soldier who's on my team in Chile, dies, I see that he dies and he's over there. He, from his computer, sees the central point of view, and he's like, oh, I got shot, I died. And the one in Vietnam sees it from a whole point of view and says, oh, Chile guy died. So we all experience the same reality, but nobody will ever see the act of shooting the way I see it, or the way he sees it, or the way, nobody will experience it as I got shot. Only the Chilean guy will see it. So that's how pretty much all coexist in the material world, in this universal bubble. You could say, that they say, some philosopher says, forgive me if I don't know the source, that if a tree falls in the forest, but you don't hear it, did it really fall? I remember thinking, what the heck? Just go to the forest, whether you heard it or not. Casually, you could walk by and say, this tree fell at some point. The tree is there. The tree fell. What does that analogy mean? I can never understand it. If you don't hear it, did the tree even fall? What that means is what I've been trying to touch on briefly, so to speak, all this time, that if consciousness is not focused on matter, matter doesn't matter. If the observer considers matter, the photon, as a particle, it's the observer that gives it meaning. Oh, it behaves like a particle. You expect it to be a wave, it behaves like a wave. So consciousness is what gives meaning to matter. Just like in the analogy of the video game, I may be here with my, earphones and say, hey, move, they're gonna shoot you. Oh no, they shot you. Or, oh, they killed me. And suppose I'm a teenager and my mother is behind me, sweeping and thinking, what are you talking about? None of that is even there. And then myself, I turn off the computer because it's dinner time, and I don't care. Whatever happens in the game, if people are playing among themselves and the rest of the planet, I'm just having dinner. That is what my reality is now. So for all intents and purposes, that video game, that virtual reality, might not even exist. That's what it means, that if you don't hear the tree fall in the forest, it could very well not have fallen, because it doesn't affect you. You, conscious entity, don't think, oh, I get some input from matter, it sounds like a tree crashing, I guess a tree fell. And that's when it becomes, important. That's when it matters, given that it has any relevance to you that a tree fell in the forest. But, the point to bring home is that consciousness gives meaning to matter. And I guess we're going to have to do this in two parts, because it's getting really late and I don't want to speed up through these points. I'm going to leave the 4 minutes for questions or considerations or comments or personal experiences, if there are. And I'm going to take another sip of water. I'm also going to mute the YouTube feed. There, no more echo, just the cicadas. Okay, everybody seems to be bamboozled by my cosmic considerations, but that's good. I guess, my overarching point is that how much you can draw just from breathing in and out, and a lot more can be said. I guess it would have helped, in retrospect, to actually make a presentation like I did with my other one on prayer, and have a PowerPoint thing so you can actually see the topics that I'm about to touch on, and the sub points, so it's easier to grasp all this. But this got recorded, so you can go back over and over and try to make sense of my cosmic considerations. Let's see if I can wrap it up in a few minutes without opening a whole other parenthesis. Did I say everything I wanted to say? Or I guess, we can always cut it short. 3 minutes, it's not the end of the world. Maybe I'll make it 3 minutes longer next time, because it would be really just confusing to talk about other things. Meanwhile, let's see, are there any questions in the chat? No. Okay. So next time I wanted to talk about all the mentions of pranayama in the scriptures. I wanted to talk about, say, Dhruva Maharaj, who is mentioned controlling his breath to the point that at some point he held his breath, and all the and the whole universe kind of held his breath at the same time, and the demigods were choked. The whole universe was like, they didn't have any more air. And that's very important based to what I was saying, that we are all alone in the universe, in this universal bubble. It feels like we're interacting. It's like, I'm here, so and so is there. The cicadas are there. They make that, they make sure that we realize they're there. And yet we're all alone with our cyber goggles and our cyber glove in this universal bubble. The thing is that the bubbles coincide, just like a video game. It's the same virtual reality, but only I can see that virtual reality, that yogic, that war scene from my point of view. So I'll be expanding more on this next time, and it'll be the second half of my considerations on all that, and hopefully something more. So thank you for your patience and your company. I hope I could be of help to someone or future people who will watch the recording. And I'm gonna catch my breath for until the next week.